What would you do if the people representing your dream turned out to betray it? What if the empire you built from the ground up started crumbling from the inside? Not because of numbers or sales, but because of how people were treated. That question echoed in the mind of Marcus Reed, a man the world saw as a symbol of success. He wasn't born with wealth or connections. His story began in a one-bedroom apartment in Atlanta, with a small idea, a used laptop and an ambition bigger than his circumstances. Years later, that idea became Reed & Co., one of the fastest-growing retail brands in America, built on a promise that every customer, every worker mattered. But recently, Marcus had begun hearing quiet rumors. Complaints whispered through the corporate grapevine. Stories of customers being ignored. Reports of employees showing favoritism. And even murmurs of bias. He didn't want to believe it. His brand wasn't just about profit. It was supposed to be about people. So he made a decision that would test everything he thought he knew about his company. That Saturday morning, just after 9, Marcus stood in front of his mirror, staring at his reflection. Gone were the sleek navy suit and polished shoes. Instead, he wore an old denim jacket, faded jeans, and a baseball cap that had seen better days. His beard was untrimmed, his shoes scuffed. He looked like any ordinary man walking into a store. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a CEO. He looked like the kind of man people might overlook. And that was exactly what he needed. He picked up his car keys and took one last glance at the framed photo on his dresser. Him and his late mother, smiling outside the first Reed & Co. store. She'd once told him, "Success means nothing if people forget their humanity." That sentence followed him like a shadow as he left his house and drove into the warm Texas morning. The store he chose was in Springdale, a suburban town just outside Houston. It wasn't the company's top-performing branch, but it held sentimental value. It was the 5th store he had ever opened, the one he had personally cut the ribbon for years ago. Back then, he'd known every employee by name. Now, as he pulled into the crowded parking lot, he realized how distant that past had become. He parked, took a deep breath, and felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from anticipation. He wasn't stepping into a boardroom today. He was stepping into the unknown. Would his company still reflect the values he'd built it on? Or had something changed without him noticing? Marcus walked toward the entrance, the Texas sun reflecting off the glass doors. The familiar logo above them made him feel a rush of pride. This was his creation, his dream made real. But as he reached for the door handle, pride gave way to something else, a quiet unease that whispered, "What if the dream's been corrupted?" The air conditioning greeted him with a rush of cool air. The scent of new fabric, fresh paint, and cleaning spray filled the space. At first glance, everything seemed perfect. Employees in neat uniforms, aisles well-stocked, soft background music playing. To anyone else, it looked like a thriving store. But Marcus wasn't here to see perfection. He was here to see the truth. He wandered through the first aisle, pretending to browse kitchenware. Everywhere he looked, customers were chatting, laughing, comparing products. A young woman in a blue uniform was explaining the features of a blender to an older couple. Her tone was cheerful, her smile effortless. That was the kind of energy he loved to see. But he also knew it wasn't the whole story, because somewhere in this very building, something had gone wrong, and he was determined to find it. He moved toward the back of the store, near the electronics section, where a tall young man leaned against the counter. His name tag read Kyle. He was staring at his phone, earbuds in, completely unaware of the customers passing by. Marcus picked up a box of wireless speakers, examining it slowly, waiting. Surely the employee would notice him. Offer to help. He didn't. Marcus shifted his stance, giving him every chance to engage. Still nothing. Finally, after nearly a full minute, Marcus cleared his throat softly and asked, "Hey, could you tell me a bit about these speakers? Are they good for outdoor use?" Kyle barely lifted his eyes. "Everything you need's on the box, man." Marcus blinked, taken aback. His voice stayed calm. "Right, but I was just wondering if you've tried them. Any personal recommendation?" Kyle sighed, snatched the box, flipped it over, and mumbled, "Says waterproof, so yeah, guess so." He handed it back and went right back to scrolling his phone. A hollow feeling crept into Marcus's chest. It wasn't just the lack of service, it was the lack of basic respect. He'd built this brand on treating people with dignity, and here was an employee treating a customer like an inconvenience. He gave Kyle one last chance. Thanks. Are these compatible with most devices, or should I check the specs online? Kyle rolled his eyes. Bro, it's all right there. Just read it. The words hit harder than Marcus expected, not because they were rude, but because they revealed something deeper. This wasn't one bad moment. This was neglect. It was apathy. He set the box down quietly and took a slow step back, his thoughts racing. If this was how an ordinary shopper was treated, what about others? Was this how people were being made to feel in stores with his name on the door? As he turned to walk away, he caught sight of an elderly woman in another aisle looking lost. Before he could approach, a smiling associate hurried over to help her, kneeling to read labels, speaking with genuine warmth. The woman's expression softened, her shoulders relaxing. Marcus felt a flicker of hope. There was still light here, but it was clear the light wasn't shining everywhere. What Marcus didn't know was that his undercover visit was about to take a darker turn, one that would expose not just poor service, but prejudice. And the discovery would change how he saw his company, his leadership, and himself forever. Marcus walked deeper into the store, pretending to browse, but his focus was razor sharp. He wanted to see how employees treated every customer, not just him. Near the home goods section, he spotted a young mother struggling to lift a box from the bottom shelf while holding her toddler in one arm. 2 employees nearby noticed her. One turned away. The other hesitated, then reluctantly approached, offering a half-hearted, "You need help?" Marcus felt a twist in his gut. The tone wasn't rude, but it lacked care. It lacked the spirit his brand was built on. He moved on, passing displays of pillows and cookware until he reached the back corner where the clearance section was set up. The air there felt heavier, quieter. That's when he heard it, a low, mocking laugh followed by a voice saying, "Bet he's not buying anything expensive." He froze. The words weren't directed at him yet, but instinct told him to listen. 2 young men in store uniforms leaned casually against a metal shelf, whispering to each other while glancing in his direction. "You see that guy in the denim jacket?" one said. "He's been walking around for a while, probably just killing time." "People like that never buy much," the other smirked. "Yeah, looks like he's window shopping. Don't waste your time." Marcus's chest tightened. He wasn't angry, he was disappointed. The casual cruelty in their voices hit harder than open hostility ever could. They didn't know who he was, and that was the point. To them, he was invisible. He looked down at his hands, remembering the calluses from his early years unloading trucks, building displays, staying late when he couldn't afford extra help. Every store, every paycheck, every success had come from treating people right. Now, standing in the same kind of store he'd once dreamed of building, he felt like a stranger in it. He decided to test something. He picked up a set of cookware and turned toward the 2 employees. "Excuse me," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Can you tell me if these are oven-safe?" One of them barely looked at the box. "Should say it right there," he replied flatly. "Probably not, though. It's clearance." Marcus nodded slowly. "Would you mind checking for me?" The young man groaned, flipped the box over without interest, then shrugged. "Yeah, it's fine up to 400 degrees. You good?" The tone wasn't helpful. It was dismissive, and Marcus realized this wasn't about workload. It was about attitude. He gave a polite thank you, set the box back down, and walked away. His mind wasn't quiet anymore, it was racing. The whisper of rumors had turned into the sting of proof. The values he preached from conference stages were not reaching the floor of his own stores. As he moved toward the front, he passed a middle-aged woman in a green apron, smiling as she folded clothes neatly on a table. Her name tag read Angela. "Morning," she said warmly. "You finding everything all right today?" Marcus smiled. "Actually, yeah. Thank you." "Good," she replied with a small nod. "If you need help, just holler. We're here to make your day easier." Her sincerity caught him off guard. It wasn't rehearsed or forced. It was genuine. For a moment, the weight in his chest lifted. Maybe there were still people holding the company together, quietly carrying the values he'd built it on. But just as he began to feel a flicker of hope, another voice cut through the calm, a voice dripping with arrogance. "Man, I swear, some people just come here to browse and touch everything," said one of the employees from earlier, laughing again. "Bet that guy's about to leave without buying a thing." The words weren't loud enough for everyone to hear, but Marcus heard every syllable. And this time something inside him snapped. Not in anger, but in resolve. He wasn't going to leave quietly. Not this time. He continued to the checkout line, where Angela was now helping another customer. When it was his turn, she smiled again. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Marcus set down a small item he didn't really need and replied softly, "Not exactly, but I think I found what I came for." Angela tilted her head. "Oh, what do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "Let's just say I got a clearer picture of things." She looked puzzled but friendly. "Well, I hope it's a good picture." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took the receipt, thanked her sincerely, and walked toward the exit. As he stepped out into the heat of the afternoon, he stopped and turned back. The glass doors reflected his face, the face of a man who had once believed his company stood for fairness and respect. But inside that reflection, he saw something else too, the weight of responsibility. He leaned against his car and took out a small notebook from his pocket. It was old, filled with ideas from when he first started the company. On one of the earliest pages, in his own handwriting, were the words, "Every person deserves to be seen, heard, and respected." He stared at the sentence for a long moment before writing beneath it, "When we forget this, we lose everything." Marcus sat there for several minutes thinking about his next move. Walking away would be easy. Pretending this was an isolated problem would be even easier. But that wasn't who he was. He hadn't built an empire by ignoring problems. He started his car, but he didn't drive off. Not yet. He was going back inside, not as a stranger this time, but as himself. And when he did, the truth would finally be revealed. Not just to the employees, but to him. The question wasn't whether he could fix it. The question was whether the people inside were ready to face the truth with him. He took a deep breath, turned off the ignition, and stepped back out into the heat. Marcus Reed was going to face his own creation head-on. What waited for him inside would test every belief he'd ever held about leadership, loyalty, and justice, and nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus walked through the doors again, this time with purpose in his stride. The same blast of cool air greeted him, but now it felt sharp against his skin. He no longer carried the quiet curiosity of a hidden observer. He carried truth and the weight of what he had seen. He went straight to the front desk and asked calmly, "Can I speak with the store manager, please?" The young woman behind the counter blinked, startled by his serious tone. "Of course, sir. Just a moment." She picked up the phone and paged for the manager. A few minutes later, a man in his late 40s approached, his name tag shining beneath the fluorescent lights. David Turner, store manager. His smile was polite, professional, and slightly guarded. "Good afternoon. How can I help you today?" Marcus extended a hand. "Marcus Reed." David's handshake faltered. "I'm sorry, did you say Marcus Reed, as in the company founder?" Marcus nodded once. "That's right." The color drained from David's face. "Mr. Reed, I had no idea you were visiting today." "If I'd known," Marcus raised a hand gently to stop him. "You weren't supposed to know, that's exactly why I came." The words hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. The young woman at the counter straightened, eyes wide. A few nearby employees paused, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Marcus's voice stayed calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I came here today as an ordinary customer. I wanted to see how we treat people when no one's watching. And what I saw..." He paused, glancing around. "It wasn't what this company stands for." David swallowed hard. "Can you tell me what happened?" "I'll do you one better," Marcus said. "Gather your staff, all of them." Within 10 minutes, the employees filed into the small break room at the back of the store. Conversations hushed the moment Marcus stepped inside. A few whispered his name. Some looked nervous. Others looked curious, even skeptical. Marcus stood near the center, his hands folded loosely in front of him. His voice, when he spoke, carried the calm authority of a man who built something from nothing. "Most of you know my name, but today I want you to forget it. Because when I walked through this store an hour ago, nobody saw Marcus Reed. They saw just another man in a denim jacket." A murmur rippled through the room. He continued, "I came here because I've been hearing things. Complaints, stories, whispers about customers being ignored, disrespected, even judged. I didn't want to believe them, so I decided to see it for myself. He let that sink in. No one spoke. The silence was thick. I walked through this store and asked for help in electronics. I was brushed off. I overheard two of you talking about me like I didn't belong here. You didn't know who I was, and that's fine. You weren't supposed to. But what's not fine is the way people are treated when you think no one's watching. One of the young men from earlier, Kyle's counterpart in this version, now named Ryan, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes fixed on the floor. Marcus's gaze lingered on him, not with anger but with disappointment. You didn't fail to help a CEO today. You failed to help a person, and that's far worse. A quiet voice broke the silence. Angela, the kind employee from earlier, raised her hand slightly. Sir, I just want to say I'm sorry this happened. It's not all of us. Some of us really try. Marcus turned to her, his expression softening. I know. And I saw that too. You reminded me of what this company was built on. But good hearts can't carry the weight alone. Everyone here has to believe in the same standard. David, the manager, stepped forward cautiously. Mr. Reed, I take full responsibility for this. I've tried to keep the culture strong, but maybe I've missed things. Maybe I've trusted the wrong people. Marcus nodded. It's not about blame, David, it's about accountability. For all of us. I built this company on the belief that every customer deserves respect. But somewhere along the line, we've started confusing efficiency with empathy. We've gotten faster but colder, bigger but less human, and that ends today. The room stayed silent, the only sound the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Marcus took a slow breath. I didn't come here to punish anyone. I came here to remind you of something. When people walk into these stores, they're not just buying products. They're trusting us with their time, their attention, their dignity. If we can't give them that, then we don't deserve their loyalty. He could see the impact of his words in their faces, shame in some, reflection in others, and quiet determination in a few. He stepped closer to the group. From this day forward, things will change. We're bringing back the foundation this company was built on. Kindness, respect, and service that comes from the heart. Not from a script. Not because a manager says so, but because it's the right thing to do. David nodded quickly. Understood, sir. I'll organize training immediately. Whatever you need. Marcus shook his head. Not just training. Transformation. We're going to talk about bias, about empathy, about what it means to really see people. And I'll be the one leading those conversations, across every store, personally. There was a small gasp from one of the employees. Someone whispered, He's serious. Marcus smiled faintly. I'm always serious when it comes to people. He turned toward the door but then paused, glancing back at the group. One last thing. If any of you ever see something wrong, if you hear someone being mistreated, disrespected, ignored, I expect you to speak up. Not because you fear punishment, but because silence helps the problem grow. And I didn't build this company to be silent about injustice. The employees sat quietly, absorbing the message. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Angela spoke softly. Mr. Reed, thank you. I think we needed to hear that. He nodded, offering her a small, genuine smile. I think I needed to say it. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing against the tile. But as he reached the door, he stopped. For the first time in hours, he felt a spark of hope flicker in his chest. He'd seen the worst side of what his company had become, but he'd also seen the part worth saving, the people who still cared. And that was enough to start rebuilding. Outside, the afternoon sun had begun to fade, painting the parking lot in a golden hue. Marcus leaned against his car, watching customers move in and out of the store. Some smiled, some hurried, some looked lost in thought. All of them were people who deserved to be treated with dignity. He took out his notebook again and wrote 3 words under the sentence he'd written earlier. Rebuild from within. He didn't know what tomorrow would look like, but he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of something far more powerful. Marcus Reed had walked into his store as a stranger. Now he was leaving as a leader reborn, and his company's real transformation was just getting started. Marcus sat in his car for a long while after leaving the store. The engine silent, the air heavy with thought. The hum of the parking lot surrounded him. Shopping carts clattering, car doors slamming, children laughing. But it all felt distant. He had seen what he came to see. Yet the weight of it pressed deeper than he had expected. He thought about Ryan's dismissive tone, the careless whispers, the quiet apathy. Then he thought of Angela, the spark of warmth that reminded him why he had started all this. The contrast between them burned in his mind. It wasn't just about bad behavior. It was about what had been allowed to take root in silence. He knew he couldn't change the world overnight, but he could start by changing the world inside his own company. He opened his notebook again, staring at the words he had written. Rebuild from within. Underneath, he began to write more. Every store, every manager, every employee, every customer. He wasn't going to delegate this. Not this time. He was going to show up himself. Marcus started his car and drove toward the highway, the golden light of the setting sun cutting through his windshield. The radio played softly in the background, but his mind was too full to listen. For years, he had focused on expansion, new locations, larger teams, higher profits. Now he saw what he had lost in that race. Connection. The farther he drove, the clearer his purpose became. He wasn't just fighting bad service. He was fighting a mindset, a quiet erosion of empathy that could destroy everything he had built. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by old photos and papers from the early days of Reed & Co. There were pictures of the first store opening, of handwritten notes from customers who felt seen, of his mother standing beside him with pride in her eyes. He closed his eyes and remembered her voice again. Never let success make you forget where you came from, Marcus. He smiled sadly. I did forget, he murmured. But I won't again. He spent the next few days planning. He reached out to regional managers, scheduled surprise visits to other stores, and arranged meetings with training teams. Every message he sent carried the same subject line: a return to our roots. Word spread quickly through the company. Some employees were nervous. Others were curious. Many had no idea what to expect. But for Marcus, this wasn't about appearances or damage control. It was about truth. The following week, he visited another branch, this one in Baton Rouge. As he walked through the doors, the staff straightened immediately. They knew who he was this time, and that made their politeness careful, almost rehearsed. He smiled, shaking hands and asking questions. How long have you been here? What do you enjoy most about your job? How do you handle tough customers? Their answers were polite, predictable, safe. But behind their words, he could hear something missing, genuine passion. Later, when he spoke privately with a cashier named Lena, he asked her, Do you feel valued here? She hesitated. Sometimes. It depends on who's managing. Some of them really care, but others just want numbers. Feels like the people part doesn't matter as much anymore. Marcus nodded slowly. It confirmed what he already suspected. The problem wasn't one store. It was the system. A system that had grown too big, too fast, forgetting the heart that once drove it. He leaned back, folding his arms. What do you think would make it better? Lena looked surprised. You really want to know? I wouldn't ask if I didn't. She thought for a moment. Maybe if people felt heard, like their voices mattered. Right now, everyone's afraid to speak up. Her honesty struck him like a bell. That was the missing link, fear. The kind that grows quietly until it silences the good. When he left that store, Marcus didn't feel defeated. He felt awakened. Every conversation was a clue. Every flaw was a chance to rebuild. He began to hold roundtable meetings across states, sitting face-to-face with employees, listening to their stories. Some shared stories of great teamwork. Others described managers who ignored issues or favored certain customers. A few even broke down in tears, saying they had lost faith in what the company stood for. Marcus didn't defend. He didn't justify. He just listened. At night, in hotel rooms between cities, he filled page after page in his notebook. Plans, notes, reflections. Each line became a piece of something greater, something new. He wrote, Leadership without humility breeds distance. Growth without empathy breeds decay. Success without soul breeds collapse. As the weeks passed, word of his visits began to spread beyond the stores. Customers started noticing changes. Better service, warmer greetings, managers who paid attention. Small things, but powerful ones. And inside the company, something subtle began to shift. People started talking to each other differently. Managers began asking for feedback instead of giving orders. Employees who once stayed silent began speaking up. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fast. But it was real. One evening, Marcus received an anonymous email. It read, "I used to think no one cared. Now I see change. Thank you for reminding us what this company is supposed to be." He read it twice before closing his laptop. For the first time in a long while, he felt peace. He knew there were still problems to fix, still lessons to learn. But the fire was back. The purpose that once fueled him, the belief that business could be built on kindness, had been reignited. Marcus Reed had gone undercover to expose others, but what he had truly uncovered was himself. And the man he found was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to lead with heart. The transformation had only just begun, and the world would soon see what happened when a company remembered its humanity. Months passed, and word of Marcus's quiet crusade began to ripple through the company. At first, employees were cautious, expecting his sudden presence to fade. But Marcus didn't vanish back into his office tower. He stayed in the trenches, walking floors, sharing meals in break rooms, sitting beside clerks as they worked through rush hours. He wanted to understand every heartbeat of the business again. In some stores, employees welcomed him with open arms. In others, the air was tense, the smiles forced. Not everyone liked change, but Marcus wasn't there to be liked. He was there to rebuild something worth believing in. The turning point came one afternoon in Chicago, when he walked into a regional meeting filled with over 100 managers from across the Midwest. The room was thick with unease. Some of them saw his visits as inspiration, others as surveillance. He stood at the front without a script, without slides, just a quiet conviction that filled the room. "When I started this company," he began, "I didn't have investors. I didn't have fancy degrees or powerful friends. I had people who believed in me. People who treated customers with care because they saw them as equals, not transactions. Somewhere along the way, that belief got lost. We got so focused on speed, on growth, on numbers that we forgot the very thing that made us different." He paused, looking at each face in the crowd. "And that's on me. I stopped listening as closely. I stopped walking these floors. I thought I could lead from a distance. I was wrong." A murmur spread through the room, the kind of collective silence that meant people were truly listening. "This company doesn't survive because of one man's vision," Marcus continued. "It survives because of the hearts and hands that show up every day to live that vision. Every store represents our values, or our failure to live them. And I've seen both." He let that truth settle before speaking again. "From now on, leadership will look different. No more memos from behind desks. No more pretending issues disappear when they're ignored. We're creating a new promise, a living code. Every manager will mentor. Every employee will train not just in skills, but in empathy. You'll know the names of your customers, not just their receipts." There was movement in the back of the room. One of the older store managers, a man with silver hair named Jerome, raised his hand. "Mr. Reed," he said carefully, "what you're asking for, it's not easy. Some of us have been doing this job for decades, changing how people think. That takes time." Marcus nodded. "You're right, Jerome. It does take time, but it also takes courage, and it starts with us. I can't promise perfection, but I can promise this: any company can lose its way. The real test is whether it has the strength to find its soul again." The room fell silent. Then someone started clapping. Another followed. Soon the applause grew into a standing ovation, but Marcus didn't smile. Not yet. Applause wasn't the goal. Change was. Over the next several months, that change began to take shape. Stores across the country adopted what employees came to call the Reed Standard, a simple, unspoken rule. Treat everyone with respect, no matter who they are. Mystery shoppers reported remarkable shifts. Complaints dropped. Customer satisfaction soared. Even employee retention improved. But beyond the metrics, something deeper was happening. In one store, a teenage cashier stood up for an elderly customer who was being treated rudely by another shopper. In another, a manager started hosting short morning talks about kindness and teamwork before opening hours. Small gestures, yes, but each one sent a message. The culture was healing. Late one evening, Marcus visited that first store again, the one in Springdale where everything had started. The air felt different now. The staff greeted customers warmly. Ryan, the young man who had once dismissed him, was restocking shelves, focused and attentive. When he saw Marcus, he froze, then straightened nervously. "Mr. Reed," he said, his voice low. I just want to say I'm sorry for how I acted that day." Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I appreciate that, Ryan, but I'm not looking for apologies. I'm looking for growth. Have you learned from it?" Ryan nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, I have. I didn't realize how much my attitude mattered. I guess I thought customers were just customers, but they're people, like me." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's all I needed to hear. Keep doing better." As he walked through the aisles, he noticed Angela again, still working there, her presence as warm as ever. She waved when she saw him. "Good to see you back, Mr. Reed." "Good to see you too, Angela," he replied. "You've done this store proud." "Trying to keep your promise alive," she said with a grin. Her words lingered with him as he left the store. That night, Marcus stood outside in the quiet parking lot, the neon sign of Reed & Co. glowing above him. The company had survived its reckoning, and so had he. He knew there would always be new challenges, new lessons, new people to remind him why he started. But now the mission was clear. The company's future wasn't about being the biggest or the richest. It was about being the most human. He looked up at the sign and smiled. "We're not done yet," he whispered. Then he walked toward his car, the cool evening air carrying a renewed sense of purpose. The man who had once gone undercover to find the truth had found something far more valuable, proof that even in a world of competition and chaos, integrity could still win. And sometimes, the greatest transformation begins not in boardrooms or strategy meetings, but in the quiet courage of one person deciding to make things right. As Marcus Reed drove into the night, a thought filled his mind, one that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The heart of a company isn't in its profits, it's in its people. Lose that and you lose everything. He gripped the steering wheel, feeling peace where there had once been doubt. He didn't need the spotlight, the titles, or the applause. He just needed to keep building a world where respect was the rule, not the exception. And with that conviction burning in his chest, Marcus Reed drove on, ready for the next chapter of a dream he was finally proud to call his own.